I think faith and religion at their best is about union with God. It's about living life in all its fullness and enjoying God and discovering God and learning to live with God. So for me, faith is about trying to discover God within yourself and God in the world. I suppose the obvious ones are baptism, which is a way of, it's an expression for me, it's an expression of God's unconditional love for the person, for the child or for the adult. And that's what baptism is. There's lots of questions around baptism. Parents, for example, have to answer questions, but at root, it's an expression of God's unconditional love for the person, which is not dependent, for example, with the child, it's not dependent necessarily on the faith of the parents. And it's just God saying to the child, I will love you unconditionally forever. And then confirmation, which is when people reach an age of reason and decision making for themselves, and they're able to join the institution of the church and really respond to that first unconditional love expressed in baptism. And I would say, finally, the sacrament of Holy Communion, where people in the church sit around a table, however that's managed, and to share a meal with God. And that's what you're doing in communion. You're sharing an intimate moment in families. Sharing a meal is one of the most important things you do. And it's the same in the church and in your life with God. You share a meal. And that's what we're doing. Within the Church of Scotland, within the Reformed tradition of the Christian faith, not symbols so much, but the Bible is central. And the Bible's everything the church wants to do rotates around the Bible. And so it wants to justify all its actions in relation to the Bible. In terms of symbols, the obvious one is the cross. And you will see people wearing a cross, and most churches will have a cross inside the sanctuary, or the main sanctuary. And I suppose the symbol is important because it's a sign of God's presence in the world, God's presence in suffering, and also giving hope in places and times of suffering. So the cross is a symbol of God's presence, but particularly God's presence in suffering. And I suppose in terms of clothing, again within the Reformed tradition, there's not a hard and fast rule about these things, but clergy will often wear a clerical collar, a dog collar, as a sign of office. Well, it's the theology that affects the daily life, not the symbols. And I suppose because I understand the faith to be about union with God and relationship with God, and it's like being with a constant companion, a lover, a friend who's always there. And that informs your everyday. It informs you in the park, in the street, on the bus, at work, and also in worship. You're trying to consciously bring yourself to be present to the presence of God. And that's what you're trying to do, it seems to me. And that informs who you are and what you're doing.